Hello and welcome to Group 13's presentation on Hudepohl Brewing Company. We're going to start off by talking about some of the challenges that they face in the brewing industry. At the time, brewing has become increasingly concentrated. A lot of the larger corporations and companies that were brewers were implementing vertical integration. They had everything in terms of production to bottling to distribution. That made it hard for smaller companies to compete on price when larger breweries can have economies of scale, spreading costs over large volumes of products. There were industry changes as well. There were many more markets for beer now, convenience stores, popular premium beers, marketing towards women, and all these things that the larger brewers were able to adapt to when it was much harder for a smaller company to put out the capital for that or the funds for that. There were also union wages in the brewing industry were higher. This tended to hurt the smaller companies a lot more because they couldn't spread the cost of labor over the larger volumes of product. To top all that off, the average Cincinnatian drinks less beer than the average American, since most of their almost 50% of their entire products were based out of Cincinnati. That did hurt them. Okay, moving on, we can do a value chain analysis with Hudepohl. And we can see a lot of things that they're doing that was to their advantage and a lot of things that they were not so great at. Raw materials cost more for them. They were ordering in smaller quantities compared to the larger brewers. They did have a lot of production inefficiencies. There were lower cost production technologies available that they chose not to go with. A lot of brewers did that. For their fermentation tanks were not in use. There was a lot of inefficiencies in their operating. For example, they could have produced 3,845 barrels per cycle more than they were, so they had the capacity to do more. The racking capacity was at 69%, while the bottling was only at 40%. They also had truck idle times were quite high. Things like that were just inefficient in general. Those were small things that make up this company that were more or less inefficient. It's not all bad though. They did have some labor efficiencies. Brewing continuously basically cut out the need for cleaning. A lot of their workers were interchangeable, so if they needed staff or somebody was on vacation, they could easily adapt them over. In general, Hudepohl kind of struggled with a lot of their operational things as well. So we'll be moving on.
As was previously mentioned, the brewery's value chain operations were a significant factor determining profitability. Now, the firm operated under two different operating strategies, with two different distribution methods. In the first operational strategy, draft beer, intended for quick consumption, was put in barrels and sold without pasteurization. These barrels were either delivered directly by the brewery locally around Cincinnati, or delivered by independent distributors. The firm also pasteurized and bottled their brew to allow for longer shelf life, more agreeable to retailer distributions. Out of brewing, bottling, and distribution, the combination of activities that led to the highest profit margin was bottling with an independent distributor. Despite the higher profit margin potential, the firm's general manager, Bob Pohl, adopted a wait-and-see approach, determining to react to competitor strategies and actions. They did not take advantage of the opportunity to advance their bottling and distribution to new markets, and failed to gain market share in their region. Our group determined that Hudepohl seemed to have monetary barriers that prevented them from embracing larger-scale productions. Hudepohl was older than its competitors, and its business model relied heavily on a workforce backed by union agreements, which would resist replacing established roles with machinery. These stipulations, however, do not mean that the firm cannot improve its profitability or solidify its control over the region. Breweries today found major success in embracing their identity as a local producer of microbrews and spirits. Before Hudepohl attempts reaching outward, they should rebrand with a stronger emphasis on their Cincinnati identity. The case mentions that their customers were perceived as being the biggest strength. Local residents were known to stock up on Hudepohl's brew when traveling, or request it from family in the area. The firm should lean into its identity, much the way that Chicago or New York established an identity for pizza. If the firm can't afford to upgrade to mechanized production, they should adopt their traditional craft as an indication of quality. They know their competitors won't be able to match their methods, and can cite the additional time and effort to give an expectation of a better product. The firm should transition its deliveries to independent distributors. This move makes sense from an operations and profitability standpoint, eliminating idle time for workers and vehicles. Similarly, the firm should capitalize on higher profit margin with additional emphasis on bottles and cans available for purchase and consumption at home. In response, the firm should shift the focus of marketing expenditures to coordinate bottle and can advertising with independent distributors. Through aggressive marketing in the Cincinnati area, they can establish their rebranding as the local leader in Cincinnati brew and create awareness of greater accessibility of their bottle and can product. After channeling their advertising into an awareness campaign, they can regain their affiliation with the local Cincinnati Reds and taper back their marketing expenditures in favor of focused advertising on their established sales region. Altogether, we know that this strategy can't bring about the same nationwide results that Miller enjoys. However, it adheres to the firm's ability to grow and establishes a differentiated approach that dissolves how directly Hudepohl compares with major products. As the firm continues to establish market presence, they can acquire other local competitors and establish itself as the only major Cincinnati microbrewer.